Hello everybody and welcome back to Military Aviation History. I'm your host Bismarck and today I'm joined by James Halstead. James is currently a PhD candidate at Brunel University in London looking at information management in British and Commonwealth forces during World War II, and he also obtained his MA at King's College in military history. He's also won a couple of prizes, for example the RAF Undergraduate Research Prize, and he recently has also presented his work on air power and Allenby's army in the Middle East, the combined arms in Palestine, 1917 to 1918. And I saw the presentation, I thought it was really interesting, and that's why I invited him today to talk a little bit about that episode in air warfare, since it's quite a unique little case study that often gets sort of maybe overlooked, one could say, in the First World War. First World War, of course, we always think about the air war on the Western Front. We have the Albatrosses, we have the Halberstadts, we have the Fokkers against the Spats, and the Sopwith Camels and so on. We don't really talk about Palestine or the Middle East when it comes to that. However, as James will tell us, there is actually quite a unique episode during the end of the war there, Third Gaza and Megiddo, that we will look into. So, if we just talk a bit about aviation generally during the First World War in the Middle East before 1917, how does it look like?
Well, because it's a secondary theatre, they've got a lot less equipment. So, for example, during Third Gaza and Megiddo, we're seeing, especially during Third Gaza, there's a lot of the same sort of hodgepodge of equipment. And I mean, during Cambrai, which takes place at the same time as Third Gaza, we're beginning to get stuff like the Sopwith Camel come in, we're beginning to get stuff like the SE-5A come in. You get neither of these planes during Third Gaza especially. They start to come in by Megiddo, so that's sort of an illustrator of the sort of, lack of equipment that they can get out in these, what are essentially secondary theatres.
So it's the Royal Flying Corps is often engaged with the, the EEF, the Egyptian Expeditionary Force. And they've been attached to the Egyptian Expeditionary Force since when? Since the beginning of the war?
They haven't been attached to them. The Royal Flying Corps is technically part of the army. So what I'm sure people interested in it will know, but a bit of background: you've got the Royal Naval Air Service, which is obviously attached to the Navy, and you've got the Royal Flying Corps, which is part of the army. So really, they are part of the army, as opposed to just being a separate air force, which is what they become eventually. Who are attached to them, they are just part of that force.
And essentially, everything that gets sent to the Middle East as part of the Royal Flying Corps is second-hand equipment, perhaps. And it's not a media focus.
Generally pretty second-rate equipment. I mean, considering the level of equipment they have at times on the Western Front. You're really just getting the dribs and drabs from that.
So until, let's say, May 1917, how successful is the British Army in Palestine, pushing against, of course they're at this point fighting against the Ottomans?
Yes. So what you kind of have in Palestine is a bit of a case of what we'd probably call mission creep nowadays. As in, so initially the Ottoman army tries to go and take the Suez Canal. Defended successfully, but then it's kind of realised, it's Kitchener that says we need the men to defend the canal, not the canal to defend the men. So because what's happened is that they basically use the Suez Canal as a natural barrier. So what they decide to do is they decide to push out into the Sinai Desert. It's a very slow process of slowly building up the logistics, but eventually to get to a certain point and go, okay, we're kind of safe, but we don't have enough water now, so we may as well just push on to Gaza. This is a very abridged version, but we may as well push on to Gaza, where there is ample supply of water, and also sort of knock out one of the main Ottoman bases. Because, Gaza and Beersheba, two of the main towns in southern Palestine. And
the man who's been responsible for this at this point is still Archibald Murray?
Murray leads a lot of the main effort. It's also worth pointing out that Murray is also responsible for other campaigns. So he's based in Egypt. I think he oversees the one against the Senussi. But he also oversees the Egyptian Expeditionary Force as it moves across.
And eventually he is then replaced by Sir Allenby.
Yes. Yes.
And is there any specific reason why he's replaced?
Mainly because he fails at the 2 battles of Gaza.
Okay.
He fights the first one and they almost win the battle, but then they kind of withdraw because of command and control issues.
Right.
An issue that constantly pops up in this campaign is water supply.
Yeah. Logistics.
Yeah, very important. In fact, it's one of the driving forces behind why they're going for Gaza in the first place. So they withdraw, and then the Ottoman army kind of builds up the defences. So they try second Gaza, which is very much probably as close to a sort of traditional First World War battle as you come.
So a set-piece battle, artillery, infantry moving up.
It's a pound them with artillery and then go over the top.
Yeah.
But the problem is that he attacks on too wide a front, so you don't have the concentration of artillery. The Ottomans are very well dug in. They're a very good army and very, very stubborn army. So once they've dug in, it's actually quite difficult to shift them. And there's just, the force to space ratios are just too low. They attack across a really wide front, but actually there's not a lot.
They probably don't have that speed of movement either that is really required in the theatre. Then.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely not. I mean, the entire plan for the battle is first assault. No flanks, nothing.
So Allenby then replaces Murray because of Murray's failure, I guess, to really win those battles. What does Allenby then do specifically when we look at the Royal Flying Corps in the theatre?
Okay. Well, he expands it. So we see there's letters from Allenby saying, it's absolutely vital we do expand the Royal Flying Corps. Initially, he says 5 squadrons.
Okay.
He actually
Which is not that much, actually, when you think about it.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's a free 2-corps front, essentially. You've got 2 infantry corps, the 20 and 21 corps, and you've got the Desert Mounted Corps. So, I mean, on the grand scale of things, it's not a huge front in terms of manpower. So he wants to get 5 squadrons by the end of it. With, I think, presumably the 5th squadron would support 20 Corps and Desert Mounted Corps, but he actually, has to do with 4 squadrons. The other thing he does is he integrates it a lot better into the Egyptian Expeditionary Forces structure. So what we have before, we don't really have any sort of codified structure in the Egyptian Expeditionary Force. What we have is fairly ad hoc groupings, kind of going, we'll have this bunch of divisions under this commander, which is what happens during Second Gaza. So what Allenby does, and bearing in mind he does get some extra reinforcements, he does get some extra divisions, which is an advantage that he has over Murray.
Did Murray never ask for those, or he just...
Murray asked for those, but he wasn't... He
didn't have the gravitas.
No, there wasn't really the political will to provide him with them. It's a very, resources are very, very tight at this stage in the war. If you're thinking about the beginning of 1917, you need all the troops that you can get on the Western Front, and you've also got the subsidiary theatres in Mesopotamia and Salonika, which are kind of eating up troops. He gets these extra forces, he can put together 3 corps, and the way that he integrates the RFC into that is very much along Western Front lines. He's the Western Front general who's coming over to Palestine to command there, and he uses the same techniques. So we've got corps squadrons. So we've got a corps wing, which is what the 5th wing, which is the wing that's been going through all the way with the Egyptian Expeditionary Force. That becomes the corps wing, and then they set up a new wing called 40th Army Wing. So we have a corps wing and an army wing, 2 squadrons in each. It's quite interesting to see that he splits up the experience. So we've got the very experienced Australian Flying Corps Squadron, number 1 Australian Flying Corps, or number 67 Royal Flying Corps Squadron. They are in the army wing, and we have one of the new squadrons, 111 Squadron. They go in to the army wing with the Australian Flying Corps Squadron, and then in the other one we have another pre-existing squadron. That's number 14 Squadron, I think. And we have 113 Squadron
Yeah.
joins there, and they're again the newly formed squadron.
So he takes one experienced
Yes.
squadron, one inexperienced, puts them together
Yes.
and says, train with each other, learn with each other.
Yeah, I think so. I haven't quite come across the logic of it, but it kind of makes sense to say
the Army core wing and the core wing have experienced men and up and coming soldiers. And this is based really what the RFC has already been doing in the Western Front.
Yes. Yes, so we also, because we've got two wings now, we have a special Palestine brigade that gets formed. So we now have the Palestine brigade, which commands all of these forces, but then we also have Middle East brigade, which is back in Egypt, and that does a lot of logistics, a lot of the training.
Okay.
But yeah, it's very much the way.
That's interesting, because sometimes what we see, is commanders essentially from one theater going into another theater, trying to change everything the way they had done it before, and it not working out. Here it seems that Allenby actually took sort of the right ingredients from the Western Front, saw what was happening in the Middle East, and applied what he needed to apply.
Yes, definitely. And he also takes over a lot of experienced officers.
Yeah.
But I think if you think about how it is in the First World War, it is learning how to fight a modern war with artillery, with aircraft. It's the first major war fought with aircraft. Yeah. So these are the sort of structures and techniques that are proving effective on the Western Front. And there's a bit of theatre-specific innovation, which is quite interesting to see. But yeah, you're very much right in saying he does take what works.
What I also got from the paper you wrote on this is that he actually wanted to build up a reserve. So Salmond, I think was it? Who was part of the Palestine Brigade, I think it was?
Yes, he is commander of the Palestine Brigade, but during Third Gaza, he gets sent back to Middle East Brigade because Branca is put in charge, and strikes me as a bit of a political appointment, just to kind of get him out of the way. Lots of politics in Palestine.
Definitely.
And
Salmond essentially wants double the amount of aircraft in reserve than are in the front lines, if I got that correctly.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, it's quite a tricky reference, quite a tricky thing to work out, but. Again, this is based on Western Front logistics practice, which is having double the machines in reserve and parts in reserve that you have on the front line.
Which probably also, considering it's the Eastern, not the Eastern Front, the Middle East, the maintenance of these machines is going to be quite tricky. Getting the resupplies for your machines, the equipment and so on. So having a good amount in reserve is possible. How about sort of repairing and maintaining aircraft? Was there any specific logistical structure that was put in place?
Yeah, that's where Middle East Brigade comes in, because you've got ex-aircraft park, which is part of Middle East Brigade, and they do a lot of scientific experiments where there's some really interesting files about how they they try out seawater for developing photos, because it's cheaper. You can just carry it out the sea rather than purified water. And
did
so
that
they've
work?
got I think it did. I think it was cheaper. I'm not sure whether it was adopted. I haven't seen anything on that. I haven't quite managed to dig that deep. But they're basically the workshops, which is again following Western Front logistics practice, having these workshops within the wider brigade structure.
So RFC is engaged there now in this new structure that Allenby has created.
Yes.
Eventually, of course, it becomes the RAF. But what sort of, if I want to get a little bit more specific, what sort of planes, first of all, were they using? We said they were sort of having second-hand hand-me-downs. All right, so we had to move because of reasons, but James was just about to tell us what sort of planes were used by the RFC and the RAF during the Middle Eastern campaigns.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, there's quite a hodgepodge of equipment. So especially in Third Gaza, when they expand very rapidly, have to basically put together two squadrons locally. But they do get sent the machines from home, and they've got some stuff lying around. So we've got number 111 squadron, which starts out with something like 5 Bristol fighters, some Bristol monoplanes, Vickers bullets. There's some other stuff thrown in, but they've got a load of RE8s as well. So they've obviously got the BU2s. They get everywhere. So it's kind of just a big mishmash of equipment. The new Corps Squadron, number 113, they've only got 2 types of aeroplane, which is probably the lowest in the entire force. But I think number 111 Squadron have something like 5 or 6 different types. It's
logistically speaking, also not ideal, but
absolutely not.
What sort of missions were they doing? I mean, they were doing mainly reconnaissance, we said. Was it also sort of flexible armed reconnaissance?
Yeah, it's pretty split up between the 2 different wings. So Corps wings, you're obviously each squadron is assigned to a Corps HQ, and they carry out missions within their tactical area. So we have tactical reconnaissance, artillery spotting, stuff like message dropping, and then once you move up to army level, you have sort of army level sort of strategic reconnaissance. The way they sort of conceive of the levels, army level is strategic. So they're doing strategic level missions. They're also doing, there's not so much a focus on specific aerial superiority missions, but there is fighting in the air as well. And lastly, they're doing stuff like photography missions at Corps level, obviously, in their local area. But at Army level, the Australian Flying Corps take a huge number of pictures. They map several thousand square miles of Ottoman territory before Megiddo, which allows them to make a lot of command decisions. They're able to plan the campaign and the battle much better because they have these accurate maps. Well, they're not completely accurate, but they're enough to get a picture.
And better than what the Ottomans have, I guess.
Yes, way better. The Ottomans, they're relying on sort of local pilgrim maps throughout the campaign. So it is a lot lot better, and especially as they move forwards, they use professionals to map the terrain once they have it. At first, it's pretty, it's not very good quality of maps, especially from the air.
And sort of from this information that is collected by the Corps wings, the Army wings, how fast does it get sent to the actual ground units?
Okay, so during Third Gaza, they're aiming to have that cycle of intelligence back to ground units within about 5 to 6 hours of the photos being taken. So
that's pretty good.
Yeah. So they've got a fairly complicated system in place, which is kind of a lot of what my work's about, looking at systems and how you manage information in these structures. So they have liaison officers at Corps and Army level squadron airfields, aerodromes, and they basically collect the information up. It gets mapped at the aerodrome sometimes. Then that goes up to Army, and then they also send out these updated maps by motorbike courier to the formations. So you're taking the photos, developing the photos, extrapolating what intelligence you can from those photos. Plotting the intelligence, and then making copies of that and getting it all out to pilots, all out to the individual units, formations, all within 5 to 6 hours, which is pretty impressive.
Considering the environment.
Absolutely. And the fact they don't, like most planes, don't even have wireless. And certainly not radio.
Okay. Looking a bit more specifically, maybe now at sort of Third Gaza and Megiddo, case studies that you actually used in your paper. First of all, what is Third Gaza and what is Megiddo?
Okay, so the Third Battle of Gaza is towards the end of October 1917, beginning of November, and that, in my case study, I'm looking at Third Gaza as basically carrying on until the capture of Jerusalem in December. There's sort of mix-ups in terminology. It's one of these things in military history, but it's not absolutely precise. Because we have the Battle of Beersheba within the Battle of Third Gaza, so it's probably more accurate to call it a campaign. But what you have in Third Gaza is Allenby's first point in command. He takes over from Murray in about midpoint in 1917. So Third Gaza is he's sort of preparing his troops, getting everything built up, getting the aircraft.
Back, I think.
It was meant to take place in late September, and for a number of reasons, troops not being ready, There's not enough aircraft ready. Like number 111 squadron gets formed in mid-September.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
that's
so
a bit late.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. But this is how much they're trying to pull these squadrons together. They're only forming a quarter of their air power a month before the battle. So they push it back to late October, which it gets slightly perilous because it's you're getting ever closer to the rains.
Yeah.
So what Third Gaza is, it's sort of, you've got the Ottoman line between the towns of Gaza and Beersheba, and what Allenby wants to do is he wants to break that line.
Yeah.
So he it's kind of like a series of blows on either side. So first he starts off by bombarding Gaza itself. Reserves get moved there because they're going, well, obviously going to attack Gaza again.
Just like last time.
Yeah, just like last time. And then they go for Beersheba.
Okay.
So they move 2 corps, the Desert Mounted Corps and 20 Corps. They, move around the flank, take Beersheba. And that's meant to provide them with water, enough to push on. But it's not planned as a sort of flanking manoeuvre operation. This is all intended to stretch Ottoman forces really thin. So once they take Beersheba, there's Ottoman counterattacks. Because what else do you do but counterattack?
You lose territory, you retake territory.
Exactly.
That's what you do.
Spoken like a true German.
Pretty much.
And then they attack. So then they attack Gaza.
Yeah.
They make some fairly limited gains. Then they attack again in the centre because they've stretched the Ottoman forces out so thin that they can just power through the centre. And this thrust kind of gets slowed down for a number of reasons. Pretty not fanatical, but pretty stubborn Ottoman resistance. Like there's one Ottoman regiment that holds on to some ground. That means the cavalry can't make their breakthrough just yet, so they have to wait until the next morning. So that obviously wastes a night, and by then Ottoman forces can start pulling back. So they break through. The Ottoman line's completely broken. They fall back. To a line around Junction Station. That again falls to a flanking movement. They're slowly moving forwards. This is about 20 or 30 miles. The front line moves.
That's
forwards.
pretty good for World War One.
Well,
Western Front doesn't see that kind of gain for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's down to the kind of. It's kind of down to the sort of the terrain of Palestine. You've got a lot. It's very flat, and what defensive lines you do have are based around wadis, which are dry riverbeds, or higher ground, like
strategic areas.
Yes, definitely. And you don't really have many of these areas once you abandon the Gaza-Beersheba line until you get to Junction Station. So that falls. Ottoman forces kind of split up, and then you've got a kind of very slow grinding battle of attrition to sort of close in and take Jerusalem before the rains.
I presume the RFC was doing a lot of artillery spotting initially?
Yeah, so we get a very high level artillery spotting in number 14 squadron, who are supporting the attack at Gaza. And then you sort of see a huge peak. And you see a bit of a peak when they're attacking Beersheba, almost higher, but this is very consistent. It's very consistent because they're constantly flying over Ottoman lines, guiding in artillery.
How easy was it really to move up with the artillery, considering that these gains are being made? Again, logistics, kind of infrastructure. There isn't much in Palestine at the time. It's a pretty backward province of the Ottoman Empire, so you can't really move up your heavy artillery. A lot of what you can move up is horse artillery, so you kind of do get these operational pauses while you move the artillery up. But you also don't want to, you want to push up spoil
as
the
fast
momentum,
as possible. Yeah. So it's quite a tricky balance, but the sort of roles that the RFC are taking, they're essentially the same as the Western Front, but you have a very different emphasis. You have a huge amount of strategic reconnaissance. You have a lot of contact patrols. You don't have a lot of artillery spotting. There's Cambrai, which goes on at the same time. I compared the amount of artillery spotting that goes on between the two battles.
It's different.
It's different. It's a huge gap, and they don't even reach the same level as Cambrai in Palestine, which is, and I mean, this is one of the biggest artillery bombardments outside the Western Front at Gaza.
Doesn't even compare to Cambrai.
No, doesn't even compare in terms of the effort that the RFC put in.
Is there any strafing, any sort of bombardment, tactical air support?
Yes, so you've got ground attack, which does increase over the course of the battle.
Okay.
So ground attack in the Royal Flying Corps, you'll have to, excuse me here, I'm going on to the undergrad, but ground attack in the Royal Flying Corps, you have specific missions, but you also just have strafing missions, like they're saying, if you're out and you see something you can strafe it.
So just flexible mission
parameters. Pretty flexible, but you do have specific ground attack missions. Like I talked earlier about B Flight, that is a formation formed specifically for doing ground attack.
Okay.
And there's quite an interesting evolution in ground attack over the course of Third Gaza, which kind of feeds into Megiddo the following year. So B Flight, initially they're attached to Palestine Brigade itself, we'll send it wherever it's needed. So during the fighting at Tel Sheria, which is when they break through the centre, they attach B Flight to 20 Corps when they're making that attack. And then from then on, it kind of just stays with them. And then you get later in the battle, probably late in about mid-November, I think it's 17 November, they then get attached to the army wing, who are then responsible for coordinating all ground attack.
So they're a little bit sort of flexible firefighting force.
Yeah.
That you put where you need it.
Yeah, I mean, army wing pretty much goes where it's needed. There's a lot of ground attack. Allenby actually, obviously there's so much of it. Allenby mentions it in his letters. Once the Ottomans are retreating from Gaza, they're just strafing these columns.
All right. And talking about strafing and sort of hammering the Ottomans, Megiddo. What happens there? First of all, what is Megiddo? And then what was the role of the Royal Air Force?
Yeah, it's the Royal Air Force by then. So Megiddo is late war. It's September 1918, a few weeks before the armistice with the Ottoman Empire. So Megiddo is kind of the final collapse of Ottoman forces in Palestine. The battle itself, it's very different to Gaza, Third Gaza. Because Third Gaza, I sort of look at it as a sort of mobile attrition battle. It's all about tempo and forcing that stress on an enemy as you drive forwards. Whereas Megiddo is, it's all about a fast shock action. It's about creating that initial just panic, and then just capitalising that, and just quickly sort of finishing off the enemy army. They're helped by this. It's the Ottoman army's in a pretty dire state by September 19. They do put
not just the Ottomans.
Quite true. I mean, they're capable, but logistically they're very stretched thin. They're not getting the best troops because they're focusing on the Caucasus. So Megiddo is again another example of this sort of deception in warfare. So you just get a big cavalry breakthrough on the coast, who then drive forwards, basically through and then around the Ottoman lines. In fact, they reach the Ottoman HQ.
That's a bad thing to happen.
And they don't even realise that they're there. So von Sanders has to just abandon his HQ in the middle of the night. I mean, they don't manage to capture him. He's the overall commander of Ottoman forces.
And he's a German.
He's a German. You've got a lot of Germans in all of the Air Force is German. And you've also got the special German forces that are in there. Mostly they're sort of very much like on the Eastern Front during the Second World War. They kind of inserted into Ottoman forces, just sort of as like a
sort of attached.
And a lot of the artillery is Austrian or German. A lot of the machine gun companies are. In fact, during Third Gaza, there's a big charge by cavalry when the Ottomans are retreating out of Gaza, and that's all against Austrian and German machine guns and artillery.
Wow. But going back to Megiddo, so this fast shock action was done. The Ottomans are retreating. And suddenly the RAF is sort of let loose.
I mean, the RAF is absolutely vital for Megiddo. They're vital for coordinating the cavalry shock action, you've got a whole squadron that accompanies them forwards and can actually check around going, there's retreating Ottoman troops here. At Jenin, I think they capture about 10,000 Ottoman troops.
Okay.
Because they have a contact aircraft that sees the retreating column, drops them a message, and they send off a few brigades to capture these troops. So they're really responsible. They're also doing the same thing with the infantry. They're coordinating that battle again, like they did during Third Gaza. But the thing that people focus on most, and which I feel your your viewers will probably know the most about, is the ground attack during Megiddo, which is again about, once you've created that shock effect, it's about, just keeping it going. I mean, they completely disable sort of command and control pretty early on by basically bombing communication centres and headquarters the night before the battle. So once the battle starts, there's actually very little idea of what's going on. Some of the formations, especially east of the Jordan River, they don't actually know that there's a battle going on.
Oh wow! Okay.
Because the communications have been.
And that's been knocked out by the RAF.
Yeah, it's been knocked out by the RAF. So you get all these strafing missions, pretty constant. I mean, there's a huge for the time amount of tonnage dropped. Army Wing, which is carrying out the most strafing missions, they drop about 40 to 50 tons over the course of the battle.
Okay.
Corps Wing drop about 15 tons. Okay. I mean, if you look at the amount of bombs that the German Air Force drops on London during the Blitz in one night, this doesn't compare at all. But for the time it's quite a theatre, But the problem with ground attack is that it is not flexible at all. They have a very rigid structure put in place. Like they work out exactly where these Ottoman troops are going to be retreating before the battle. Okay. And once the battle starts, they can then and they also have the Bristol fighters from the Australian Flying Corps circling above these spots.
Telling everybody where.
Yep, and saying, Ottoman troops are retreating exactly in the spot that we so it's not very fluid. Okay. It's not very fluid. It's very, very rigid, very, very structured. But it has this huge effect. It can. It's just widespread terror.
I think you also mentioned in your presentation sort of that they specifically target these choke points.
Yes.
Where the Ottomans had to retreat from.
Yeah.
And just utterly, carnage, I guess. I mean, I think what also struck me in your paper is that it actually got to the point where British pilots didn't want to fly these missions, or Commonwealth pilots didn't want to fly these missions because this is not war. This is just shooting people in a valley, essentially. Enemy soldiers, but
there's a number of really not really famous ones, but really high casualty rates amongst the Ottoman forces. I think it's in the She papers where he's talking about basically how one pilot comes into GHQ EEF, where Allenby is, and says, "I'm not going out there again." And Allenby just says, "Yes, you will," and basically just screams him down.
You will drop the bombs until I tell you to stop dropping bombs or something like that.
And it's one of these, when you're reading through the Palestine literature, you get these reoccurring themes, and one of these is that when Allenby comes in, it's a huge morale booster. He's great at man management, he's great at reorganizing, and everyone feels like they're actually doing something. But another one of the thing is, every time you look through an RFC account and they talk about ground strafing during Megiddo, they talk about how horrible it was and how low their morale was. And how what an effect it had, because they're essentially used to not really having that sort of exposure to the ground operation, and then now they're trapping entire Ottoman armies, which are the equivalent of corps. So it doesn't sound quite as bad as when you say you trapped an entire Ottoman army, but I mean you're trapping them in these little wadis, like the Wadi Al Farah, which is probably the worst. A huge amount of stuff that gets abandoned there, but you're constantly flying low. And one of the accounts I saw said that after a while, some of the Ottoman troops just realised they couldn't escape, so they just sat down on the ground. I don't know how true it is, but it's quite interesting, especially from the mentality of these flyers. That they're going, this is how horrible it is.
I mean, it also shows how much their role has shifted, sort of from this isolated, let's do reconnaissance, let's do a little bit of bombing, to actually we're getting involved now.
Yeah.
And we're part of this high-speed campaign where we were literally pushing into the enemy.
Yeah.
And making sure he doesn't come back.
Yeah.
But yeah, two things then. What sort of oppositions did the RFC and the RAF have in terms of, you already said, like German planes, German pilots, albatrosses, I guess. What was it? I mean, I know the Turks got albatrosses, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah. You know what? I'm not so sure. It's fairly limited, and actually they have a bit of an effect on Second Gaza, but they don't really manage to interfere with artillery spotting.
To be honest, if the Brits or sort of the Allies have problems sending planes to the Middle East, I have to send second-hand sort of hand-me-downs. Then I don't see the Germans being able to send a lot of stuff.
Oh yeah, and they have the same. So they have a very small number of planes, basically, not a great number.
And the logistical,
they're hugely. I mean, the logistical aspect of it is very interesting. There's again, I haven't actually managed to look at the original German documents because I don't speak German. But there's some talk about how some of the German engines, when they have to get repaired or serviced, they send them all the way back to Germany, service them in Berlin or wherever, and then they send them all the way back out.
It's funny how some things never change. It really is funny how some things never change.
Yeah.
But actually, on that note, lessons learned. Germans could have learned from that perhaps, but let's just focus on the RFC and the RAF.
Yeah.
Going into sort of the interwar years and going into the Second World War, it seems to me from your paper a little bit that the lessons that the the Royal Air Force learned in the Middle East were sort of forgotten and then picked up again.
Yeah. This isn't so much something that I've looked into heavily. I mean, it's kind of difficult to say, oh, well, you know, Palestine, this what's essentially like a second theatre, you know, a backwards theatre.
Doesn't really hold that importance.
It doesn't hold that importance. But, I mean, people like Wavell, Wavell serves in Palestine, and he's responsible for drafting FSR in between the wars.
FSR is what?
Field service regulations, which is one of the things that's sort of seen as a guiding doctrinal manual for the British Army. I mean, part of the problem is that the RAF goes off one way towards strategic bombing to retain their independence, and the army is still kind of going, well, we really like you, but also we're going to emphasise our role. So it's kind of this inter-service rivalry, and we kind of lose that sort of touch a bit. But
it comes back
in the Second World War. Very definitely is revived. I'm not sure whether they take a lot of the same lessons, but it's quite an interesting.
Adapted probably for the new sort of technology. Okay. Well, for anybody who sort of got interested now in this topic, what are sort of your, let's say, introductory to intermediate reading recommendations?
Okay, if you want to do the Air Force in Palestine, there's not a lot really to read. There is Michael Molkentin has done a book, Australia and the War in the Air.
Okay.
And that's got two chapters on Palestine. That's a very good book, and you actually get the whole of the First World War as well, and the Australians in the First World War. But again, a lot of that is, because the Australians are everywhere, you get a lot of an image of British aviation during the First World War. For a more general book on the Palestine campaigns, and in fact really going from Egypt through to Palestine, I'd probably suggest Anthony Bruce, The Last Crusade. That's a really good, it's pretty cheap, but it's a good read. It's quite interesting, and I think it gets a lot of the points that I'd probably make. For specifically on Third Battle of Gaza, John D. Grainger's Battle of Palestine, 1917.
Okay.
Again, that's very interesting. Doesn't cover the air that much. No, that's one of the recurring themes. But you can access the War in the Air, which is the official official RFC RAF history for free online. It's on archive.org, so you'll be able to find that on there. You can access all of the Australian official histories online again.
You're very good for that.
Yeah.
You're really good, Australia. Well done.
Honestly, some of the records that the British don't have, the Australians have digitized.
Perfect. I mean, that's already a pretty good list. I'll link that down below in the description as well. And if you have anything else, you can always tell me later and I'll add it.
Absolutely.
But yeah, thanks very much, James, for your
problem
insights.
at all.
Absolutely great to have you here.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. If you have any questions, just let us know in the comment section below. As always, you can support the channel via a donation on Patreon for $1 or $2 a month. You can get some class exclusive perks here as well. And as always, have a great day, good hunting, and see you in the sky.